Well, here we are. It's still morning in Victoria. It's afternoon where you are, though, Dr. Eleanor.
Yes.
Um, we've already had a quick little check-in, but we're I think this is episode 3 of But Wait, There's More with Dr. Eleanor. Um, as always, I'm just grateful to have some time with you, and getting the inside scoop is something I enjoy doing, apparently. So I keep digging in for more. Um, like other times, I just want to start with what you've been up to. We haven't been able to connect much in the last couple of weeks.
Right.
Um, so maybe just provide an update. I know you've got some courses coming and books and all sorts of activities. So
All sorts of stuff. Yes. Well, the biggest thing I've been up to is I finished the book on integrated channels, and that is at the Book Designer, being formatted for publication. And it's a book that, in the multidimensional work that I do with the four worlds, it's important to integrate the worlds. And in fact, Ra said when we were working together, and I was working with the dream design and the physical matrix, that you can't, the matrices do not relate except when you integrate them. So the physical body is the physical body, but it operates in many instances independent of the mind. So in order for the two of them to relate, the information needs to be transferred and integrated in some way.
mhm.
So what I've done is I've written all of the channels in all of the worlds and all of the combinations of the worlds. And that ends up being 148 channels. And I hope I got all the iterations. I got the book all done, and then I realized I left one out.
Oh,
So there are 148 channels in the book, and the way I wrote them is each iteration is independent of every other one. The flavoring is similar, but the nuances are different in each world. And I give action points and keywords for each channel. So it's going to be a very practical, empowering book. And it should be done within a month.
cool.
I've also been working on the 13 books I wrote with Ra, and I've done editing on all of them. I've done commentary on several of them, and I've had Marvin do a medical commentary on the relevant medical stuff.
Cool.
And
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
and what's interesting is that although a lot of what Ross said was just straight out wrong, a lot of what he said intuitively was on the right trajectory.
Mhm.
So it should be pretty interesting for people once those are released. And at the same time, I've been getting ready to teach. And based on the input from the focus group I did last week, I'm now thinking of doing one class that would be a membership. And I would teach twice a month, I would teach the multidimensional design with the intention that after a very short period of time, human design practitioners would be able to increase their offerings by offering integrated work. And thinking that twice a month I would teach to the design section and twice a month the four worlds because they integrate.
Mhm.
And I think that would be a more cost effective for everybody
Yeah.
because I want to make it affordable. So, and I think we can get all the modules done by the beginning of July.
Cool.
And the way I work is pretty spontaneously, as you know.
Hmm.
So I don't want my classes to be PowerPoint presentations. I want modules that people can watch and study, and then the classes would be much more of a discussion and a teaching in an alive way.
So
So
I'm going
I'm
to share something
pretty,
here, if that's
yeah,
okay. So this diagram. Oh, let me just get rid of the footer there.
thank
This
you.
illustration I found is really useful, and I haven't like seen it in a lot of places. I think actually the first time I saw it, Cindy shared it in one of your webinars. But it was like all of a sudden I understood much more about the different worlds and the fact that the design is different. So even circling back to it's 148 channels. Is it effectively that it's within the mental world? There's X number of channels within the spiritual. Is that how you come to that number, or is it how?
No,
Okay,
I'll
so
show
what?
you. I'll
Okay,
show you. Um, Let me pull, if I can find it. Hold on.
and I guess a part two to that question. So the four worlds, when you received that information, was it after you broke from Ra, or did you have it back then and discussed it with him? And was he aware and dismissed it, or what was the evolution of the four worlds? Because I know you came to Ra with the disciplines already, right? You were already familiar with the Kabbalah and those
Well,
things.
as I've said in a couple of podcasts, you have to connect the dots retrospectively. You can't know going forward what, you can visualize, but you don't have all the detail.
Hmm.
So it, I didn't know why I was studying all the things I was studying. And I did it mostly because as a clinician in private practice, um, my clients needed something that they weren't getting.
Hmm.
And in most therapy, a therapist has a certain orientation. Because of my Kundalini experiences early in my practice, I really dedicated my focus to people who were on a path of consciousness and growth. And it became very clear working with couples that ordinary conversation didn't do it. If a couple is working in the mental world, I can label it now. I couldn't have labeled it clinically when I was working with it. But working with couples and relationships, which was one of my big specialties, I kept looking for how we could transform communication when couples kept getting stuck in their communication.
Hmm.
And when I discovered clean language around 2009, I realized that it accesses different levels of information psychologically than things like active listening or imago dialogues or hypnosis.
Hmm.
And so when I met Ra and worked with him, I was already trained as a Jungian analyst. I was trained as a Freudian. I was trained as a clinician. Um, I had studied NLP. I had studied CBT. Uh, so it was natural for me as a social scientist when Ross said, would I document and validate? Um, it was easy for me. I was already an astrologer. I already knew he was missing a world or a calculation because he thought a dream design was a sleep design, and it's not.
Hmm.
If you understand sleep architecture, as we move from waking state to a REM state to a light sleep state to a deep sleep state, we move in consciousness. And that, if there was a dream design, there had to be a sleep design.
Mm-hmm.
So I pulled out my astrological hat, and based on my twin kittens, I got the calculation that turned out to be the physical world,
Mm-hmm.
because I was looking for what would differentiate twins and twin mammals, not even twin humans.
Right.
But in order to differentiate twin humans, you also have to go to the physical world. So as I evolved in my work in design, with a little bit of a push from Ra to document the statistics of it, I began to see that he didn't have a complete system, number one. He was not fully open to expanding, although he did say that the matrices need to integrate. And he did acknowledge when we taught the dream workshop that it wasn't possible to really understand how we function in the physical world or the dream world, as he called it, without integrating the matrices.
Hmm.
The emotional world is a matrix that I downloaded. He confirmed that the voice told him it existed, but it didn't give it to him.
Hmm.
And so the worlds are structured differently. And when I ran the statistics on the mental world, I was able to validate, which is really, from my perspective, the most important aspect of it. I was able to validate that the structure of the body graph is real.
Mm-hmm.
That the type held, but I did get 5 types and not 4. And there's strong statistics. And I was able to see in the statistics that the centers held. In other words, if the center were a square, like the root center, I found 4 factors. A factor is a statistical analysis that shows the relationship between constructs. So if you have the root center and no factors existed in it that held together, you'd say, wait a minute, there are independent components within this construct.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, there were 4 factors in the root center. There were 3 factors in the splenic center. There were 3 factors in the solar plexus. There were, several more factors in the throat center. But so the structure of the body graph held,
Mm-hmm.
but other things did not hold. Like when I put the circuits together and asked the program, do these channels and gates that Ra hypothesized form a set? They did not.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't speak about an individual circuit, an abstract circuit, and a logical circuit and have it backed up by science. You can say it seems to make sense this way, or you can say it seems like people with this react this way, but the science isn't going to support it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the problem I had with releasing a great deal of the statistics, which I did, when I wrote the papers in 1999 and 2000, they were all posted on my websites. And they were posted on my websites probably until a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
But when I presented the statistics, and for example, on 30,000 cases, 5,000 of whom had heart attacks, so two groups, 2,500 in each group, one died of heart attacks and one did not die of heart attacks. And I looked at this group of 5,000 to see if they had an open or a defined heart center, would it make a difference in their mortality?
Mm-hmm.
And it did not.
Didn't hold up. Yeah.
So when Ra and some of his close associates wanted me to release the statistics on each center so they could say that there was a correlation, I refused to do it because it would be fudging the data.
And potentially dangerous for someone to read that and in their mind think they
Well, and
died.
as I'm going through the books, for example, one of the examples is that Ross said that somebody who has an open thyroid center is likely to have thyroid disease and can have all kinds of weight problems and other problems. And that's not at all true. Because thyroid problems can be endocrine, they can be hormonal, they can be, psychological.
Mm-hmm.
We, in order for the statistics to really work at the level of depth that it needs to work, we need to look at the interaction and code the matrices for the actual world it's in. And an example of that would be that the solar plexus, for example, is only existent in the mental world and the physical world. In the emotional world, notice there is no solar plexus,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a portal to the sacral center that connects the 6 to the 59.
Mm-hmm.
And so if somebody is emotionally reactive, it's likely coming from some kind of excitation in the physical world, probably on an unconscious level, which is why lie detectors work.
Yeah.
Right? It's emotions are going to have a galvanic skin response, autonomic nervous system. And then the person perceives what that emotion is. In order to transform it, they need to move into the mental, spiritual world, where they begin to ask themselves, how can they transform this emotion and release it? So it's not about the emotion itself, it's about the process by which you live within a design.
Right.
And that's what I'm teaching people, is not a formula. Each is different. And I was going to look for
Well, and I
pictures.
think you said it earlier before we started, but you're going to teach about energy flow versus formula is effectively what we're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the flow of energy. I'm going to share another image here, which is also yours, which is that sort of energy flow between the worlds, and you've got this connection, at least in this visual, with the feet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think I've mentioned to you, I've had a really interesting conversation with Ted Garrison. We went out and walked in a park, and he was just talking about the feet and like it's a portal, and he was drawing it, and he was encouraging me to trace my feet and put it on the wall, which I haven't done yet because it was just a little too out there for me at the time. But like, there's something to this. And then I don't have her name in front of me, but I did did a qigong the other day.
With Sarah.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Or
And
Heather. No, with
oh,
Heather.
sorry, Heather, with Heather. Yeah, and it was like really, really ticking all the boxes. I could feel the energy, and part of me wants to understand the link between these from the design standpoint. My brain just can't quite do it at the moment. But like, without a doubt, there's something there that that resonates and sits for me. Can I ask a question that I've had a bunch of times, and I've had different answers, because you mentioned the root having 4 elements, or the spleen having 3. So being a pattern matching kind of guy, that root is a square in the body graph, and the spleen is a triangle. I'm sure I've heard from others that the shapes themselves and the colors that they have didn't have meaning. It was just
That's not true.
That's not true. Okay. So
No.
could you clarify that? Because I think a
No, I
lot of
can't
people are into that.
clarify it much.
Yeah.
I can clarify it a little.
Okay.
Um, the I know the shapes have an importance because of the factors.
Okay.
And I know that directly from Ra, I know, and spoke to him at length about it, that the voice spent 5 of the 7 days with him, making sure that every proportion in the body graph was exact, that the shapes were exact, the dimensions were exact. And I understand that because the body graph is sacred geometry. And I own the copyright to the real body graph because Ra didn't copyright anything at the time we worked together. And so I copyrighted everything.
Hmm.
And the agreement I made with him was that I owned whatever I copyrighted. So I know from the statistics that the shapes mean something.
Mm-hmm.
I know from the sacred geometry of the tree of life that the dimensions of the body graph communicate sacred geometry. And when we distort the shape, we distort the unconscious message. And I'm a purist. I did ask Ra when I was working especially with the dream design, which is on its side. And I said to him, Ra, when we're vertical, the energy is coming in through the hexagrams, coming in through the yin and through the yang. But when we turn it on the side, it comes in differently. And did the voice give you any information about that? And he didn't give me a clear answer. I think it sort of stumped him that I asked that question. But he promised he would send me the original body graph, which he didn't do. But I do, in my program, have the capacity to print the body graph with hexagrams. So instead of having numbers, it actually has the hexagram itself.
Right.
So the structure of the body graph held, the content of the body graph did not hold. Mm-hmm. In other words, Ross said fertility is increased when the 59-6 connect. So if you want to get pregnant, make sure you have the 59.6. That doesn't hold.
Mm-hmm.
I checked it out on a dozen pregnancies and knew the exact time. Didn't hold. One of the groups I tested were AIDS patients, 5,000 in the database, matched samples, no correlation to getting AIDS or not getting AIDS based on the 27.6. Prostate cancer did not correlate with what Ross said prostate cancer would correlate with, which was solar plexus defined and the 6th hexagram. So from a content standpoint, the interpretations were faulty.
Mm-hmm.
From a structural standpoint, the body graph stands. And so when I began to work with it, and I knew that there were 5 types, not 4, and so I wanted to know if the dream design would have type. And so I tested type in what I was calling the triple design matrix. And I called it a triple design matrix because I was calculating the mental world, the spiritual, and the physical. Because the spiritual and the physical, not the spiritual and the physical, the spiritual dream and the spiritual sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Did those matrices hold with their calculations? And they did. So type is a real construct, but not 4, 5.
Right.
Profile is very interesting because maybe I can shoot you.
Send me a file?
Yeah, let me see. Where would it be? This is called type. So I did the following studies that I did publish. I had preliminary research on human design and health. I had research verifying 5 types, statistical analysis and definition of type in the human design and waking rave design. So that meant is if we have a single split, triple split, quadruple split, was that a valid concept? And it was. Frequency on profile, and that, let's see if this will work.
And when we get to it, I have a follow-up question then about split, triple, and then because effectively that's going on between the worlds as well, right? Like where the definition becomes single.
Yes.
Yeah.
My table won't open, but I might be able. Five types. Whoop. I did frequencies, then I did z-tests and factor analyses on everything, definition type.
What's a z-test? I don't think I've heard that before.
You look at the variables and you look to see if there's a significant difference in the difference between them that would make them independent of each other.
Mm-hmm.
So in order for type to be a real thing, it needed to be statistically significant that that one type would not overlap with another. They needed to be independent of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because you couldn't have somebody, for example, who was a projector and a reflector at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's different worlds. this is, I will take a picture of this, a screenshot, and I'll send it to you.
Cool. And while you're doing that, you've mentioned
Okay,
this. I
so
don't
how
think
do
that.
I get
Oh, go ahead.
this? How do I get this to you? Can I put it somewhere in here?
I could drop it in the chat, or maybe just email it to me, and I'll watch for it.
Hold on. Wait a minute. I don't want to lose this.
Take your time.
I don't see where I can put it. Hold on. I'll just leave it on my desktop. Oh, wait, it's holding. No, it disappeared. I'll put it in the phone chat. Will that work for you?
That should work. Yep. Yep. Do
Okay,
that.
let me see if I can find it. No, I'll just do it again. Okay.
Dropped it in text.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
In the regular chat.
Okay. All right.
So what you can see in this graph of profile is that the 1-3 and the 2-4 and the 3-5 and the 4-6, all of those profiles were basically the same frequency. And the 1-4, 2-5, 3-6, 4-1, 5-2, and 6-3 were all about 2%.
Mm-hmm.
That shows that it's mathematical, that it is not something where it distributes differently in the population.
Mm-hmm.
So what it basically says is that in a general population, in this case, with all of the things combined, profile is a mathematical construct of the calculation astrologically around the wheel. And that the lines of the hexagram are distributed around, and that the frequency of people who are distributed are equal. I mean, when you take enough people, you're going to have the same frequency on the 1-3 and the 2-4, and it's like a human being is born with 5 fingers and 5 fingers on each hand and 5 toes on each hand, and you say, oh, this is real, this is what a human being is. So we can say profile is distributed in the body graph in a way that makes it a valid calculation. We cannot interpret the lines of the hexagram based on the science.
So, because we've talked about this a bit already, and I think this is a good forum to continue this. Profile is what grabbed me, right? It was the hook that got me. It was, I could relate to it, right? It was like, oh, that's why, and, it made me feel recognized, safe. So, I mean, I think that's what you mean. Like, there's something there, to a theme to interpret, but it's not a destiny, for example. So, and part of the reason I say that is, I think it's the 4-1 profile has this concept of, like, it's this fixed destiny, and these people don't have a choice in their outcome. And
no, and the same thing with the 6-2. Now I'm a 3-5, and Ross said, oh, you bump into things. Yeah, I have bumped into things in my life because I had visual problems. But when my visual problems were solved, I stopped bumping into things. So
I love that. Sorry, could I just say,
is it my profile, or is it, that we can say things about people that are general enough that they're going to take them on and believe them,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean they're true.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good clinical observation, but it's like the DSM. You know, I can read a DSM and go through 6 and 7 characteristics and say, oh, this fits this person. I could diagnose them this way, but
Mm-hmm.
I can read another category and say it fits them also. And do
Yeah.
we want to label people like that?
No.
I certainly don't.
Yeah. I think for
So,
me. Oh,
so profile shows that the body graph is a real thing.
mm-hmm.
And most of the statistics show that, but they don't show anything about interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
And Ross stretched things with his interpretation. Um, Tones, bases, and colors, for example, I have not studied them. They can be meaningful to some people, but from a statistical scientific basis, Ra specifically said, unless you know within 10 seconds of your birth what your time is, it's not going to be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And there is not more than a handful of people who know the second of their birth.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that when I was working with Ra, he absolutely refused to do tone bases and colors on people. What changed?
Right. Because you could actually cause damage by being too particular and having the data wrong ultimately too.
Yes.
So yeah, yeah.
So, I've, oh, after I did the statistics, I started doing readings on the multidimensional charts. And what I found was that my clients validated the interpretations. But the interpretation is not a canned interpretation. It's looking at the flow of energy between the worlds, between the matrices, and recognizing that at 3 months of age, a baby has been imprinted with every cosmic energy between the sun and the earth and the moon. They have everything they need to be whole and healthy and conscious.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not limited. Not more than 95% of the population are manifesting generators.
Yeah.
And last week, I did a chart on someone who, in 6 out of the 8 designs, was a reflector, and who, in her mental world, was a manifester, and who never got the sacral center.
Hmm.
And all of my years of doing charts, she's one of the very few in an integrated chart that doesn't get a sacral center.
Hmm.
And it was very interesting because she was very strong, and she had strong between the splenic center and the self center. Different way of perceiving and interacting with the world, and just a different way.
Mm-hmm.
One is not better than the other. One doesn't make someone more conscious than another person. It's just we integrate information in different ways.
The I think you've said this before. You haven't actually come across a chart where someone's fully a reflector or a projector at this point, right? Like you've looked at a lot of charts, but there's still,
In the integrated,
yeah, in the integrated.
oh no,
Yeah.
nobody's a reflector in the integrated.
Mm-hmm.
It would be almost impossible.
Yeah. The profile and 4-1 and reflectors, there seems to be, and I know it because I felt it myself, like a desire to be special or unique. So when we hear these labels, it's like, oh, I'm a 4-1, or I'm a projector, or I'm a this or that, and it's like a label that people want seem to want to attach to. And I've found myself caught up in that as well. So I think like when you first started talking about profile and being, I think you used the word artifact, and I had to kind of like think about what you meant by that, just by that choice of words. Um, it was pretty freeing because the same thing. Like I'm a 3-5. I bump into things, and I started realizing that I was bumping into things often just because I was rushing. I was just rushing. um, I even slammed my toe last week in an argument with Wendy, and I realized afterwards that I was like, my body was like, "You're already winning this argument. You need to stop now." Like I was like actually in a position where I could feel like I was making progress in something where we were having a challenge, and then I think I had this sense like, go for the kill. You know what I mean? And so I was kind of like going for the kill, and then I started walking up the stairs and I slammed my toe so hard into this stairwell, and there was no reason to do it. And I was like, whoa, that was my body going, dude, let it go. Like she's making an effort.
Or
Right.
it was God's hand,
Yeah.
your higher self, um, knocking you some sense into you.
Hmm. That's what it felt like. I've heard this term recently, an oversoul, and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of like when I heard that it was around the same time, and I was like there's this sort of like I've had a lot of physical mental separation, like where I'm actually having a muscle test just to see how I feel collectively, if that makes sense. Like there's been a real weird energetic around that. But I know, that's what I guess what I'm getting back to is like that 3-5 profile. It was like it was just cloudy, and I'm recognizing that it's
What
uh,
I use instead of profile
yeah.
are the key words, because as you move through the cosmic energy uh, in that 3-month period after birth, you've gone from the prenatal to the spiritual to the emotional to the mental to the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, the mental. So you're making a figure eight, and the energy of those hexagrams are what's programming you.
Hmm.
And so if you read the description of the crosses, instead of imposing upon the crosses, you get a much purer interpretation of your process.
Okay. Well, I'd love to go there for a second. Let me know if you can see this chart because I know it's smaller on your screen there.
I can't read the keywords, but I can.
I could probably zoom in here too.
Uh,
So, because can you see enough with this? This is my
well, let me pull your chart up on my screen.
yeah, sure, do that. But I'll keep this up here so others can see it.
Right.
And I think maybe what I'll do is I'll show my total integrated vehicle because I think that's ultimately the net result. Now it won't zoom. Why aren't we zooming? Oh well. Um,
Okay, so you go from Sphinx or self-knowledge in the mental world
yeah.
to Maya, the foundation pattern of Maya or illusion,
Okay.
back to self-knowledge, and then back to Maya, and then listening, then cycles, and back to self-knowledge. So it's telling you something that can inform your behavior and your process.
Okay.
Think about the words and think about how you would describe what that sequence of words is telling you about how to process information.
Okay. So that's Sphinx to Maya,
Mm-hmm.
and then sorry, what's the and then
And then listening,
listening.
and then cycles, the changing pattern of cycles, and then the foundation pattern of the Sphinx or self-knowledge.
So it starts in the mental world with Sphinx and ends in the physical world
In the
with...
mental world with Sphinx.
Oh, sorry. It starts in the mental world with Sphinx and ends in the physical
Yes,
world with Sphinx as well?
the mental world of Sphinx.
Mental world. Yeah, okay.
The physical world is Maya in both pre and postnatal. The
Okay.
solar world, the emotional world goes from self-knowledge to listening. How might your life change if you listened better?
I mean, it already has. In I've had done so many things to realize how ineffective a listener I was before. Always working on it.
Okay, and then from listening, it goes to cycles. So, what might the word cycles, changing pattern of cycles, inform you about gaining self knowledge through getting past illusion, listening, and coming back to self knowledge?
Interesting. Um, I'll have to sit with that, try to connect those dots. But what does Maya mean in this context? You know, the word Maya gets thrown around a lot in human design.
Well, I put next to it in parentheses illusion.
Oh, okay. Illusion.
So, and with Sphinx, I said self knowledge. And with cycles is clear. And listening is clear. And that's the transitional pattern of listening.
Hmm. Yeah, the first time you did a reading for me, and I don't think you even knew I was a drummer at the time. So you caught my attention when you said you definitely march to the beat of your own drum. And I mean that's kind of sphinxy, right? Like it's self direction. It's
Yes, and
about
you
change.
always keep the 3410
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah,
So part of self knowledge is not just the knowledge of who you are, but of how you need to be to interact effectively with other people. And this sequence gives you a clue,
hmm,
a much better clue than saying you're a 3-5.
yeah, yeah. I mean, circling back to that, that was the first eye opener. Was what if I'm not a 3-5, or what if I approach that theme with a strategy, and my strategy was to slow down a little bit, plan a
Um,
little bit.
Sean, saying you're a 3-5 would be like saying that you're an Aquarian.
So broad themes.
It's so broad and so non-descriptive that it becomes meaningless.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it still comes back to me. It seems like a lot of people jump on profile first, but it must be just that hook, right? That thing that catches your attention. That
Well, I remember the first class where Ra introduced profile. I was
okay,
there. He
yeah,
made it up.
yeah,
You know, he looked at the hexagram and he said, oh, this could be like a first floor of a building. And he came up with the description because he wanted to write a book
hmm,
and he needed a topic that would appeal to people. And so he came up with profile. And I tested it with the hope that it would have some content to it, but it didn't.
Hmm. Um, there's a bunch of places we can go here with this, but I am interested in like, and I think a lot of people are really interested in the time with Ra. We talked earlier that you kind of put human design down, like you went, that's enough for now, and stepped away from it.
No, I didn't step away from it
No.
ever.
Okay.
I left the human design community
Mm.
because they um, didn't want to know the statistics,
Hmm.
and they wanted me to fudge the data, and I wouldn't do that. So I'm not somebody who wants to be in a battle.
Hmm.
And I had a busy practice, you
Hmm.
know. It wasn't like human design was a career for me. It was an add-on to an already very busy career.
Right.
Um, and when I first met design, I was also working in the movie business and on the set every day. So it was not going to be a profession, and in fact, my fee was a lot higher for an hour than what the human design people wanted to charge. And Zeno at the time was very threatened that I would charge more than she would charge.
Mm.
And I remember sitting with her and Ron and saying, you know, my regular session fee is $400. I can't do a reading for $100. It's just, I can't suddenly say to my clients, my time isn't worth what I've been charging you that it's worth.
Right.
So I pulled away because the timing wasn't right.
Hmm.
But I never stopped uh, teaching it to my own group of people.
Right. And it was still in your toolkit all the time, I guess. Just.
And I did calendars. Well, I did the daily wisdom practices, which ultimately I put into the Cosmic Guidance book. And I will do another one for next year when I have time. And the way I was working with the charts with every client of mine was to be validating them, to work with my clients' dreams, to work with their psychological issues or their relationship issues, and to always be using the charts
Hmm.
and looking at what showed and what didn't show clinically. And how could it be used as a personality instrument? I even released the case book.
Hmm.
I think I had over 100 cases. So working with the four worlds emerged in part because of the tree of life.
Hmm.
The tree of life has four worlds in every center. And if the body map is a synthesis, then we need to synthesize.
Right. Yeah. The Kabbalah tree of life thing keeps intersecting into everything I look at lately. Like even just I've been sort of just curious about Masons and stuff because of proximity across the street and my family and stuff, and seeing I'm finding old archives of people describing inside the chambers there, and Tree of Life is like everywhere there. Like it's very much the underpinning, but I had no idea just that whole relationship there. Um,
Well, there are 32 paths of intelligence in the tree of life.
mhm.
Multiply that by 12, 384. There are 384 lines in the I Ching.
Hmm.
There's a correlation 1-for-1.
Hmm. Yeah.
And by the way, when I do the patterns of orientation, which are the crosses, I use clean language to deepen the awareness. So you're not slanting it for the world in any direction.
Okay, I think I
It's
understand.
an inner process.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking at your design, once you understand the flow of energy, it should be an internal process and not something somebody tells you about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Want to because we're still on this sort of path of misconceptions or artifacts. We were talking a bit earlier about strategy, and whether that is, like Ra would always talk about strategy and authority. And I know, I'm fairly certain when I had a chat with Chetan, he said that he doesn't teach strategy. And I don't want to misquote him, but I'm sure that's what he said to me at the time. Um, and so, like, he broke from Ra as well. Like, was strategy and authority, another Ra-ism that
Ra, well, let me put it in the context of the history. Ra knew nothing about astrology. He really was not psychologically sophisticated. He was a man who was always stoned. And when he came to design, he was using ketamine and marijuana and who knows what other drugs. So Ra was given a download that scared the hell out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And he tried to get away from it. And he didn't know anything about it. The voice told him very little about what the content of the body graph was. It told him about the structure of the body graph. Spent 5 days and 5 nights on it. It answered the question, if this is a human design, what about my dog Burley? And all it gave him about what he called a dream design was that the voice said, when you sleep, you move into a mammalian matrix, which is based on the moon and it's on its side.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave him the matrix. It gave him the matrix of a bird. It gave him the matrix of
Plants, I think.
plants, yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't give him any content. It didn't give him any content about the lines. It didn't give him type, for example. It didn't, it did, the voice did tell him about what each center did. And it spoke in the energy of the center, is what he said. It didn't give him type. It didn't give him profile. It didn't give him interpretations of anything. Mm-hmm. It gave him mechanics. Mm-hmm. And the matrix, the mental world, the dream design, and the physical body map. It told him there was another matrix and didn't give it to him. Mm-hmm. When Ra finished with the experience, he was pretty upset and pretty traumatized. And he tried to destroy it.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, yeah.
And a woman came and had a copy and gave it back to him. So I know that drill. I've tried to get away from design many times and it wouldn't go away. The first time I tried to get away from it was when Ra sat there with Zeno and basically said to me, don't teach anything until who knows when. But don't, he didn't want me talking about transits or talking about astrology or trying to piece more information together about what this is. And I just, that was it. I wasn't about to uh, compromise my clinical practice for design.
Hmm.
So I disappeared. I didn't go to his classes. And Tom Pfeiffer, who was very into Ra, started bootlegging recordings for me
Hmm.
and sending them to me, and did not want me leaving design.
Hmm.
And I invited Tom to come when Ra formed the partnership, and Tom recorded everything that we did. So when at that point Ra had begun to hypothesize, and he and Zeno and Chaitanya came up, and I think Jurgen and maybe Martin Grassinger, they came up with type. And all that they had was whether you were to do or to wait, and whether you were a manifester, generator, reflector, or projector, and the splits.
Hmm.
That's all they had. And it was in the interest of developing classes that Ra came up with hypotheses. So, really, the only real book is the Book of Letters and the Black Book
Hmm.
are the only two Ra books that are reliable.
I don't think I've seen or even heard of either, actually. The Black Book, I think I've heard of. I've never actually seen it.
I have copies.
Hmm.
Um, I even have a PDF of it. Um, it's just straight mechanics.
Hmm.
You get the gates, you get the channels, you get the meaning of the two gates forming a channel, and that was it. That's
Hmm.
all there was when I studied it. And a lot of the other things were there to fill in what Ron needed to create classes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was becoming a business. And
It
it's,
became a business.
yeah. And it's, we've been kind of talking about this a bit here, but like, it's amazing. But in Facebook, there are groups for every type, for every incarnation cross. Um, it like I joined a few and I've had to like leave them because it's just overwhelming. It's just people arguing with each other, or we're special because of this incarnation cross, we're special because of this profile, or I mean I'm throwing the word special, but that's what it kind of feels like. It's like these clubs, and it gets quite animated and weird in there. For something that is meant to, I believe, help us collectively raise our consciousness. It's a hot mess right now. So I kind of like the idea of back to pure mechanics and having my own interpretation. Like figure out parts of it.
Well, I think the meaning of the gates makes sense, maybe.
Hmm.
Um, the flow of energy is much more important than any single gate or channel,
Hmm.
and also using Chiron is important.
Hmm.
Anybody born in the 20th century had Chiron active.
What do you mean by that? Anyone born in the 20th century? Like, what specifically? Why is it?
In astrology, um, things like Pluto were not in the astrology charts
Hmm.
because the planet wasn't known.
Hmm.
So if we do an astrology chart for somebody born in, let's say, 1850, do we use the planet or don't we? In astrology, the logic has been that once a planet comes into consciousness, it becomes active in the consciousness of the population.
Hmm.
Chiron was discovered in 1891.
Hmm.
it was not made legitimate until 1977. So, and it's not a planet, it's an asteroid.
Mm-hmm.
The Magi astrology people make a huge case for Chiron because it seems to show, at least in their system, talents and gifts and what people do with their life.
Mm-hmm.
And in the body map, it seems, from my perspective, to show something of life purpose when taken in conjunction with the North and South Node.
Okay, getting selfish here. My Chiron's 21, line 1. Life purpose and struggles I'm having. It's 21.1 was about control, I think.
Well,
No?
I don't use words like that.
Hmm.
Think about what the 4521 actually is. The 4521 is the only channel in the whole body graph that goes between the throat and the heart muscle itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's oxygen. It's life force energy. And you can use your breath to regulate your mood, your physiology, your consciousness. It's the most critical thing for you because you have access to regulating your heart using your breathing
Mm-hmm.
in a more conscious way than someone who doesn't have it activated. So without getting into the fancy, I'm this line or that line, and no, that's too specific
Mm-hmm.
for the level we're working at.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the line is going to be related to a path of intelligence. It's going to be related to the bars on the head that have not been delineated.
Bars on the head that have not been delineated. Like you've talked about access bars and you've described what that experience is like, and I'm still trying to find someone here. What do you mean by that though? Like the line? Because I remember you saying you did an access
The
bars.
way the bars are accessed is first you start with this indentation in the back of your head.
Mm-hmm.
They call that the implant band. And you stay there for 20 minutes. And then you move through all of the other positions, moving your fingers in certain ways and putting them on very specific areas and specific patterns. And there are 32 points on the head. So each one is activating a path of intelligence. And now we have things like brain tap, which using sound to activate different areas of the brain. And they're using brain scans to see the effect of this machine on consciousness.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, breath work has been big lately for me and for Wendy. She's got the 45.
No,
So
therein lies your arguments.
What do you mean by that? I'll take any and all hints. Um, Yeah, it's frustrating to think that something so simple, by simple meaning
It's a
breath work.
communication issue, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
Where is her 45?
I think I probably got it here. 45.
Which chart is that? Is that the mental world?
This is her prenatal.
Well, she has the
40.
4521
Yeah.
in all of them, I believe.
Definitely in those. Yep, and yep.
So, what does that tell you? Use what you know about the 4521 and what you know. What's her 45? What planet?
Uh, is that Saturn?
Yep.
Yeah, 45 line 4.
Oh, she's a taskmaster, huh?
uh, yeah, it's interesting. She pulled a tarot card the other day, or an oracle card, and it was the suggestion was loud and clear was delegate. It was time to get delegating, and it's interesting. She does and she doesn't. Um,
That's because she has Chiron in the 21
right.
and the 51.
Okay.
I would venture to say when you perceive Wendy as coming on critical, she thinks she's doing a good thing to be of a help.
Hmm.
And so when you feel defensive, she gets defensive.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's the delegation and the yeah desire to help. It's very interesting. Hmm.
So that's something. Now she also has the 12. So breathing is critical for her.
Hmm.
And she also has the 3410. So she marches to her own drum.
There's two of us. Yeah. Yeah.
So you need to use clean communication
Hmm.
instead of mental world communication.
Ooh, what do you mean by that? Clean communication instead of mental world communication. Like clean language is mean what you say what you mean.
No,
No?
clean
No.
language has no auditory, visual, or kinesthetic cues. And it goes to the internal state of the person you're talking to.
Okay. So if I'm not auditory and I don't understand, how does it get to the internal state of someone without being auditory?
Um, you'd ask a question like, what do you want to have happen?
Hmm.
What do you know about this now? Um, if Wendy is saying something and you don't know if she's trying to be helpful to you in her suggestion or if it's coming from her wanting something, a question like, with all of that, what would you like to have happen?
Hmm.
Or where do you want me to be? Or um, what do you know about this? Or what would you like me to know about this?
Hmm.
Those are all clean. There's no cue from you in that question that directs the person to go one place or another,
Hmm.
other than inside themselves. And so when you're dealing with communication issues, if you're not aligned, then you're not both in the same world.
Hmm.
And if she's talking in the mental world and you're talking in the spiritual world, you're not going to communicate. But if you bring the people to the spiritual world where you can internally be visible, then empathy flows.
Hmm. Yeah, we'll be married 29 years next month, so 31 together. And honestly, feel like kind of unicorns, right? Like you and Marvin have been together a long time, but like a lot of people around us have not been together that long anymore. Definitely feel, but it's been in the last couple of years where our communication's really improved. So, there's been marked improvements, changes. Like we just, sometimes we're just like, how did we make it before? Like we talk differently now. But yeah, it's some of the things you said there are very interesting. I've learned to say, what am I doing right now that's a problem? Because there's a lot of, you always, or that, it's legacy
Why
that
don't you
you expect.
say, what can I do that would make it better for you?
Hmm.
Instead of focusing toward a problem, focus toward a solution.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, thank you for that.
Really
Um,
simple,
yeah, it should be, right?
right?
There seems to be, but I'm optimistic.
Well,
Um,
people have not learned communication skills for the world.
mhm,
And, I have a history as a clinician for over 50 years. And I've spent all that time learning different communication skills and realizing that part of the reason people ran into trouble and the ones that couldn't get solved were they weren't using the right skills. The
right.
axis of awareness diagram is a pretty interesting one. If you go down,
Yeah,
down,
the one I was actually looking for is you had
yes.
descriptions for the strategy for each type, and because manifest and generate was quite a bit different, but I thought I had saved
You
it.
want me to just say it?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I was just hoping to pull something up here, but yeah.
So, where do you want me to start?
Uh, well, considering if 95% of us plus are manifesting generators, that seems like a good place to start. So, what is the strategy for a manifesting generator?
A manifesting generator is someone who can manifest what they want, but they need to make sure that what they're thinking they want to manifest aligns on an inner level, not just with what they want to have happen in the mental world, but it really has to resonate and align in the spiritual world.
Hmm.
And that means sometimes, and in many cases, waiting a week, because sometimes they don't spiritually connect for a week, till a week after the event.
Hmm.
And so I learned about manifesting generators actually from my daughter. And actually, I used her case as the case in the dream design book because at the time I was about to describe it and realized that a manifester and a manifesting generator are very different. And if we say to a manifesting generator, you have to wait to know, what's the timing of that?
Hmm.
So my daughter called me and she said, my son-in-law was a filmmaker and he was working on the PJs at the time. And she called me and she said, I think we're going to stay in Portland for another year. And he can make a movie and we can get a studio space and he can make his own movie and I can finish my PhD and, we'll just live there for a year. And I knew that was not okay with her. I knew it in my gut.
Hmm.
And I said to her, I think given that you're a manifesting generator, and mind you, I had her dream designs, I said, I think you should live with it as though it's real for 4 days to a week, and make the decision that you're going to do this and live with it without doing anything,
Mm-hmm.
and see how it feels. And at the end of that time, call me and tell me if you still want to do it. She called me 2 days later and she said, I can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely can't do it. And I asked her what made the difference. And she said, it's one thing to imagine doing it, and it's another thing to live as though you are going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a manifesting generator, we have to visualize it and put it through all our matrices. It's not a mental world, I want to make X amount of money in X period of time and I'm willing to do this. Because it could be all wrong for you.
Mm-hmm.
And with so many people, that spiritual week, postnatal week, is so critical. Because during that time, attachment happened, and the baby began relating to the world around them and interacting with people whose energy may have been pulling them in the wrong direction. So a baby begins to know what aligns and what doesn't align. So as a manifesting generator, you really need to go inside and know if what you're projecting is aligning with your real purpose and life and energy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a manifester can make things happen. That doesn't mean they want to.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean it's right for them. So even a manifester needs to wait to know if it's right.
Mm-hmm.
And usually the answer will come in the multidimensional, because you're not looking at a specific channel. You're looking at multiple channels and looking at how the energy configures within you as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can make an informed decision.
So how did your daughter sample the experience? Like she's like as though she was going to proceed, but not. I mean, you don't want to start communicating decisions like, "Oh, quick, let's sign this lease here," or like, how do you live it for a few days to see if you can live with it without living it? Does that make sense?
Well, let me give you an example. I was thinking about what my class structure would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still playing with it. I'm running it by people, well, how would it feel to do a human design class one week and a 4 world class the other week? How do I think I would integrate the information? Is
Mm-hmm.
that aligned with me? Is it going to align with the people I'm going to be teaching? And I'm not going to know until I know.
Mm-hmm.
And when I teach, I know myself enough that, yes, I'm a manifester, but most of my designs are open. And so for me to lock myself into a curriculum feels unnatural.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, from a professional standpoint, I have to have a curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So within myself, I'm balancing. How do I give the students what they need and give them what they're going to get the best from me? And that you can't rush a process.
Mm-hmm.
And so the manifesting generator part of me is playing with my 515, is playing with the skills I have and the depth I have and all of the components. But really, in me, it comes down to waiting for spirit to tell me it's right,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a lunar generator. And in the emotional world, I get the 10, I believe. It's either the emotional or maybe it's the physical world. So I'm always careful to wait until I know, because I know.
Mm-hmm.
So a manifester needs to know who they are inside themselves in order to know the timing of their decisions.
Interesting.
You know, a manifester can't just, it's not about just informing someone and boom, you take action.
Mm-hmm.
I can't ever think of a decision I made that was impulsive like that.
Right. So, so the strategy thing,
Do you
like
want to
I,
ask me the question, or you want me to finish all the types?
oh, well, 95% are manifested generators, but yeah, why don't you finish the types? But I want to ask a follow-up question on strategy and authority. So, but go ahead.
Okay. So a generator, Ra defined as someone who waits, and that their motor is always on, and they are always sort of ready to
Mm-hmm.
And I literally, early in design, saw people's lives ruined by following a strategy of or
Mm-hmm.
and making choices that were damaging to their relationships. And yes, a generator has a gut response, but it really depends where the gut response comes from. So you need to look at the design. So, for example, if someone has the gut coming from the 214, they know the direction of the self. And they need to be in touch with whether or not they're moving in the right direction for themselves. And they could go, and it could be exactly the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, oh, Raven's here. Hi, Raven. Glad you're here. So, if someone is a generator, look at the connections. And if the connection, for example, is from the 5027, that's a very different gut response than if it's from the 59.6.
Mm-hmm.
And so a generator waits, but what are they waiting for? And they're waiting to know what they know. And they're waiting to know when and how to manifest. And it doesn't mean they can't manifest. It means that they need to make sure that what they're considering from a timing standpoint and a alignment standpoint resonates with who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not by type alone. It's by looking at what is in the body map and what the flow of energy is. A projector has a channel defined, but it's not the sacral center.
So
So
then there's
projector,
five. Sorry, there's like five subtypes of projector. But are you saying that that's not a? Would you say that that's a artifact
five
as well?
subtypes of projector. Where did that come from?
Yeah, there's mental projector,
Oh, so
splenic
it's being
projector.
defined by which centers are activated.
Yeah.
Um, well, what I tell a projector is you don't need outside recognition. Being a projector means that you need to know yourself and you need to know what energy is right for you. And you pick up a lot of energy from outside yourself. So for a projector, they're energy sensitive. And it also depends in the other types where they're energy sensitive. I mean, I'm a manifester, but I have an open solar plexus, an open self center, an open head centers. I mean, so a projector can be many things, and you need to know what the dynamic is and how they use it. So I say to a projector, it's about self-recognition, not about others recognizing you. It's about you asking yourself what's right for you. It doesn't always come naturally, and you're picking up energy from outside. So the first question is, does this energy belong to me? And if it belongs to you, then how are you reading it? And what other factors are coming into play with it? And it's the same thing now for a reflector. I see open centers as all possibilities. You're not defined in any one way. So a reflector is extremely sensitive and picks up all kinds of energy from the collective and needs to know for themselves where their core is, what resonates with them, what frequency aligns with them, and that's going to depend on which gates are activated. Mm-hmm. So I talk a lot about the 5818 because it's in all of my designs. I have the 5818, the 4816 everywhere. And the 5818 is frequency. It's work on what has been spoiled, judgment. So it's the path of intelligence of judgment. And it's the judgment card in tarot. And what is a judgment about? It's frequency judgment. Is this frequency resonating with what is going on in the moment? So one of my clinical gifts is when somebody's saying something to me, because I have the 5818, 4816, I hear if the frequency of their words aligns with the frequency of their aura. Because I see auras. So if there's a misalignment, I know what to tell them to do to adjust the alignment. But a reflector almost always has a definition in the integrated. Mm-hmm. And so we are, for the most part, designed to manifest our full potential. And I guess when I got the message from God that the time was now to make this public, it was because too much misinformation was leading people astray. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I have a perfect system by any means.
Yeah.
I've put this together based on being a social scientist and, a clinician, but we need documentation and studies before we can say it's a viable system that mm-hmm. can be of help. I mean, it is of help. I know that. But it's also disempowering people, and that's tragic.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious.
Raven is saying she was one who needed this, that she had no inner authority. And yet, if I recall, Raven, your chart was very powerful in composite. Mm-hmm. So if somebody was told they had no inner authority, ooh, that's pretty awful to say to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I could say that to somebody.
Yeah. No.
Everybody has inner authority. We have inner authority from the moment we're born. It's called competence, the need to achieve. The first thing a baby needs is the need to achieve, or they would not even go for the nipple.
Right. Yeah.
So in graduate school, the first thing we studied was NH, need for achievement, need to be competent. That drives everybody. So where is that in the design if somebody's a reflector? Well, it's in the integrated, because remember, by the time a baby is 3 months old, every single cosmic energy has been imprinted into their aura. So if we did a chart for every single day between third trimester and birth, we'd see that everybody is 100% capable of manifesting their divinity.
Mm-hmm. And so let me ask you a question about mechanics and transits. Like effectively, if we're all of the body graph, then I mean there is validity to being within a transit and activating something, or also within aura of someone, right? I guess I'm not really asking a question. I'm more just.
My mentor astrologer, Catherine de Jersey, her books are fascinating. The first one was Appointment with Destiny. Appointment with Destiny? I don't remember the name of the second one, or maybe that was. I wrote the foreword to her second book. But Katie always said to me, well, dear, don't live your life by astrology. Now, that said, she told me I'd move from Chicago, and I told her she was crazy. She made me sign the contract for my lease on Michigan Avenue in Chicago. On the day and time she told me to sign it, with the clause that I could get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I met Katie in 1973. In 1976, I went to California to a Jungian conference and knew it was home, and I moved.
Hmm.
Exactly when she said I'd move. When I went to India, I had completely forgotten that she told me the time and place I'd meet somebody who would be important the rest of my life. And of course, I met Marvin on the day and time she predicted, and we've been together since the day we met.
Mm-hmm. And you also
So,
lived a mile away from each other, right? Like you
yeah,
actually
yeah,
lived near each other, but
yes,
hadn't
very
met.
near each other, and knew all the same people.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I'm going to continue, but Isaac said he was told that as a projector, I'm interested in the self. Inside, I beg to differ. If I don't understand me, then what knowledge would I have to connect to others? Well put, Isaac. Very well put. Thank you. So I don't look at transits, actually, except when I do the calendars, which I'd like to do again if I get somebody to run the graphs for me, because when I do the spreadsheet for the calendars, I show the type for each of the worlds, prenatal and postnatal, plus the composite. So when I was doing the calendars every year I think I did them for 5 years, I could predict the stock market. Worked every time.
Yeah, yeah, I remember you.
It was really neat. Okay, so let's read some of these, because
Okay.
I have to go within 5 minutes.
Okay.
Your charts are amazing. In the reading you gave me, I had 5 or 6 reflector charts. This really explains so much to me. That's Donna. And then Isaac says, my Leo sun in the eighth house and open many ahas since a sun in the eighth calls me to hermit, learn, collect my data, and then move on, and then carry on. And a punk boyfriend,
Now people are
this
jumping in all of a sudden.
Ezra, and I'm a manifester and fully integrated. Sometimes I don't know whether or not I should act on a desire because I don't know how the outcome. How do I fall into deeper trust in myself? Ezra, don't make a decision until you know, because you know, because you know, and nobody can say you don't know, which means you wait until you know, and there's no doubt. And if you continue to feel doubt when you project an image, then change the image a little bit, modify what you're thinking. So let me give you an example. I did the focus group last Thursday, and I had suggestions for how I would do the class. And as I listened to people and as I took it inside, it didn't feel exactly right. So I keep taking it inside and running it by how is it going to be. And I still don't have an absolute answer. But I'm trusting that every day, in every way, my higher self is giving me clues. So I'm waiting. And I'm modifying. And I'm talking to people about the modifications. And when everything aligns, I'll pull the trigger bigly.
That's interesting. Even that phrase you just used, every day in every way. Like Emile Coué is someone that, like a name that's just popped in my head a lot over the last couple of years, and he's kind of been in that hypnotherapy space and like all sorts of things. But
well, that was Milva sign, no, Silva mind control.
mm-hmm.
Taught
Yeah.
every day in every way, I'm better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a thought that's not better, you erase it.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, of course.
You literally cancel it.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, we need to wind up. I have a 4:30 session with someone.
Okay. Well, I mean, as always, that was fun. If you're up for it, we can do that again. Um,
Yes.
let me do my fancy, make it look like I'm all pro here at the end, and but just hang on the line here for a sec, okay?
And let me thank everybody who's on the call.
Oh, for sure, yes. Thank you, everybody. Okay, till next time.
Yes. And I hope to see everybody Thursday in my webinar at noon Eastern.
That's right.